Well, hey everybody, welcome again to Capital City Christian Podcast and to our roundtable conversations. Today I am grateful to be joined by one of my favorite people in the world.
Aww.
And somebody who I've had the honor to serve alongside of for a couple of years, somebody who has taught me, led me, inspired me in many, many different ways. My good friend, co-worker, sister in Christ, and our children's pastor here at Capital City, Karen Lauder. Karen, thank you for being here today.
Oh, so glad to be here. And I think it might be a mutual admiration
Hopefully
society.
so. Hopefully so. Well, hey, today we want to talk a little bit about children's ministry here at Capital City, the vision of our ministry here and the passion that you have for it and what families can expect out of it. Before we dive in talking about that, I just want to allow people to hear a little bit of background on who Karen Lauder is. So, could you just take a couple of moments
Yes.
to share just a little bit about your family, where you're from, kind of how you ended up in children's ministry, how you ended up here in Jeff City. Just kind of give us a snapshot survey of that for us.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the phrase, God draws straight with crooked lines?
Yes.
Well,
Is that your life?
It might be my life, yeah. So, briefly though,
Yeah.
I'll just run through it briefly. I grew up in St. Louis. I grew up in a home of the queen and king of skeptics, I would say. Skeptical about many things, and one of them certainly was any sort of organized religion. And so that had a big influence on me. And at the same time, sort of, well, what do you think about God, Karen? You know, so not trying to necessarily shut it out. Yeah. And so my sister, who's 8 years older than I, is always been super protective of me. I may not be here. She may have nagged me into the world, actually. So she made sure that I got to church and I got connected, and so that happened still at an early age through neighbors and through her and blah blah blah. But then when I became a teenager, things began to be a little bit confusing for me. I was kind of a poor kid, so I ended up staying home. All my friends went away to school. I was kind of lonely, so I dated the people who I worked with, who were 25 and older, which was considerably older than me. Yes. And so I ended up marrying one of those persons, and that was really rough for a number of reasons. And we ended up getting a divorce after 3 years. We had a son out of that marriage, so his name is Jonathan. And he's 39. He's older than you.
We talk about this often.
We talk about that. I'm like, I have kids older than you. So, and so then I moved back to Missouri, and I needed a job working part-time if I could, but with that paid enough hourly that I could support myself as a single parent, and then also have good insurance benefits. So I worked for FedEx. Did you know I was a FedEx driver?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was a FedEx driver, and that's where I met my husband now, and his name is Bill, and we have been married for 35 years. And we have a daughter together, so I have 2 children, and she is about to turn 33.
Okay. All right. So you're working for FedEx. You meet Bill. What's the transition like into ministry then at that point in your life?
Yes. Well, when I was in my first marriage, I pretty much woke up every day going, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do?" And I tried. I mean, I am a big reader, so every book on the Barnes & Noble self-help marriage list, I have read all of those. And so I would read it, earnestly try it, and it would fail.
Right.
And then I'd go read another one that said 180 different, something 180, and I would try that earnestly, and it would fail. And so that I was just a mess trying to figure out what in the world I was going to do. And one day I was folding baby clothes, and was like a message across the bottom of the news screens now that said, Jesus Christ is the answer. And it was so not of my own self. I was looking around like, is there somebody else in the room? What is going on? And then after that, I was like, what? After I've asked what was that, it immediately came again. And then I felt a little mad because I started to argue with nobody, I thought. Yeah. And so I began to say, how could Jesus Christ be the answer to a mess like this? You know, and then it came again, and I can't explain what happened. It was like if somebody could fill up a cup of knowing and pour it over you, and it could melt on you. It just floored me, and I do mean literally, I melted to the floor. Yeah. And that day, although I would say I was an intellectual believer before that day, that day, everything I thought just got sort of scraped off into the trash, everything else, every direction I was going. And I was completely zeroed in on finding out how Jesus Christ was the answer to everything. And so that led to me being back in church and ministry and going that direction. Yeah. So when I did move back to Missouri and we were going sadly through a divorce, I was immediately in church, and almost immediately people said, would you be in children's ministry? I'd like, me, well, yeah, you already know, you've picked up on something about how I love children, but I don't think you know what you're asking. You know, you maybe should know some things about me first. I don't know nothing, you know. Yeah. And so, but I did get back in children's ministry, and then in children's ministry, basically I would take the children's lesson home and I would say, Bill, what does this mean? And he would help me understand the entire story and introduced me to commentaries and study and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And so from that, one day, as a many year volunteer in children's ministry, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was at Woodcrest, and she said, hey, would you be interested in applying to be a children's director here? I think you'd be a really good fit. And what was, we didn't go to that church. So I'm a pretty loyal person. So I probably would have said, oh, thank you for thinking of me. No, thank you. Right. Except that the night before, Bill and I were driving along in the car, and I was talking about what I was going to do when I finally grow up someday. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think I'd like to be a children's pastor. And we both laughed so hard because in our circles, there was no such position that we were aware of. That was always all volunteer.
Right. Years and years ago. That was.
Yeah. And so we just laughed and hee-hawed and thought that was hilarious. And so to get that call the next day at 8:15 the next morning, I was like, what in the world? So that was the entry point for me. And I did become a children's director and eventually a children's pastor and eventually a family life pastor at Woodcrest, and served there for 18 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in Columbia serving there, then you transition out of your role there, then you connect here in Jeff City. Yes. And what year was that? That was
the end of 2017.
End of 2017, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. And so you make the transition, and now you guys live here in Jeff City. Your daughter has since moved to Jeff City, right?
What?
Incredible.
I told you. I know, from Florida to here. Yeah. Who would ever guess?
And now you have a grandbaby here.
Yes. I didn't bring pictures. You're lucky. I didn't bring pictures. So
yeah. Okay. So now that's kind of a little bit about your journey here. Let's talk about children's ministry. Tell me, just why are you so passionate about children's ministry, and not necessarily specific to Capital City, but just in general, what drives you when it comes to children's ministry, and what's some of your views of the way that church and churches need to view children?
Well, I like to say I always loved children, even when I was a child. Like, and so I think that there's a distinction between loving children's ministry and loving children.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's enough to love children's ministry. I think the leader of children's ministry needs to love children. Mm-hmm. And I think that reflects Jesus in the story of Let the Children Come to Me. They were very busy about ministry. And I think this can be true of all people who work with people. Mm-hmm. You can love the job that is as part of working with the person, but that's not enough. Right. That doesn't reflect who Jesus is. Jesus loved the children. Mm-hmm. And he said, let them come to me, not because it's 10 o'clock and their parents have someplace to go, but because he loved them. And I also am kind of a person that just loves foundations. You know, you get a good foundation and it's much easier in life and in every way. And children are. The foundation, they're at a foundational level. I like being an influence. And to me, it is the most critical and important influence, especially today in a world where there are so many conflicting voices of truth.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I've heard you say is that children are people too. And when we think about the church community, you can't exclude little children from that. And so one of the things that you constantly say that I love about you is that in everything that you do, you're going to advocate for the good of the children in our church community.
Yes, absolutely. And I think their development and where they are and listening to them as intently as we would anybody and understanding how to listen to children and how to talk to children, I am absolutely 100% passionate about that.
Good. Tell me a little bit about children's ministry here at Capital City. Give us just a little bit of the mission of children's ministry here and kind of the strategy for what we're doing right now to partner with families in discipling their children.
Right. Well, just as it isn't enough for children's pastors to love children's ministry, they need to love children. It's also not enough to have a goal that children love church. That's a good goal.
Right.
But we want them to walk out of here loving Jesus.
Right.
And being impacted and loved and know they are loved by Jesus and loving him back. And so that is the ultimate, that's it. That our children would love Jesus with all their heart is my ultimate goal. Now, I think that I have children, let's be realistic, I have them 1 hour a week.
Sure.
And so I have to really make that the best hour. That has to be up in the top things that kids want to do so that it competes with everything else that is trying to woo them. And so I think that that does say that a lot of my responsibility is then in creating the environment that allows God to move. And so I have certain values that are that I spent a lot of time thinking about and praying about and talking to ministry leaders about and being mentors, and those have to be a part of describing the environment.
Yeah.
So, would you like to hear those?
Yeah, give them to me.
Okay. So I think that I already alluded to one of them, but I do think that while this may not be the top top of the list for a lot of people, it is the top of the list for me. To me, the lobby for children is creating an environment that's fun, because the language of children is play.
Right. They love fun.
That's right. And like I said, we're not competing with other churches. We're competing with anything else that a kid could do. Yeah. And so it has to be fun.
Okay.
And then I think that it has to be practical. We have to be able to, kids have to be able to take it home and think, we talked about that at church. Here's what it might look like with my mom, my dad, my brothers, my sisters, my neighbors, my friends at school, blah, blah, blah. And so I think there's a strong emphasis on how do you apply it. And that means there's maybe less of an emphasis on how, let's do some drills and see what you know. Right. Because it is more, it's not about finding those details. It's about living those details.
Yeah. It can't be just theory.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And of course, we are teaching from the Bible. Yeah. But the Bible, I think we have to teach creatively. I mean, from the time children are in preschool, we are already competing with Sesame Street and everything else, every other thing that they are introduced to. And so we have to use those things to help them see that any truth that's in those actually came from Jesus, because Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. And just usually said a different way, but so the Bible has to be taught creatively, has to be relevant, using what they already understand in their world. I think it has to be safe emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And it's the least jazzy and the least fun value to work on, but it's the first. Kids have to be able to feel safe in an environment. And then I think the value that is most important to me is that it has to be relational. So if I were to ask you, if I could turn the tables and say, if I were to ask you what was the one Bible story in your childhood that completely caused you to be sold out to Jesus, would you be able to name that?
No.
No, but if I were to ask you who lived and walked with you as a child, that kept you in the game and then kept you oriented toward seeking Jesus and seeking God and loving Him.
You could name those people.
Yeah. And I think that's true for every great pastor I know. They and others, other fully devoted Christians, and that it is somebody in their life as a child. So the relationships are critical. And Andy Stanley's famous for saying, not rows, circles. Not rows, circles. So literally putting our kids in a circle with a small group leader who knows them, and creating an environment of relationships with the leader and then with one another is what kids need to be able to have a chance of believing and loving Jesus with all their heart. I'm asking all of my coworkers, my coworker volunteers, to be Jesus with skin on for those kids, so they can see what it looks like.
Right. And if you're not familiar with our children's ministry, that's really on our weekend services. That's how it operates. It operates in small circles, and I have a front row seat to it because obviously I have 4 little kids, and so they're all right now in our children's ministry, and they all have the same small group leader every week, and it's incredible to see the relationships that are developing there. And just personally as a parent, it is comforting and helpful and hopeful to me when I know that there are other people who are instilling the same values and saying the same things that I'm saying at home, that Kendi and I are saying at home, because, it's great for you to hear it from your parents, but when you're hearing it from people who are not your parents and it's reinforcing it, it makes all the difference. You
Yes, and we are partners
Yeah.
with parents. We're partners. And the overlap is, I like Orange Theory is a whole thing in children's ministry, but the idea is that the parents are represented by a red dot, because we will never be able, as a church, nor should we, trump what happens at home.
Right,
That's going to
right.
be the greatest influence, of course.
Sure.
But we come alongside, and we're not unimportant either as the church. And we're the yellow dot. But the overlap is in the values and in the hopes and dreams that we have for children in their relationship with Jesus.
Right.
And red and orange mixed red and
yellow.
yellow make orange, so that's why it's called Orange Theory.
Yeah.
So we want to create tight partnerships with parents, for sure.
Right. Let me end with this. If there is somebody listening today and they're like interested, like I want to be involved somehow, or maybe I want to try out what it looks like to serve in children's ministry, what's that process look like? How can they get more information to learn about what it can look like to serve in our kids ministry?
Well, it's a great time because we're getting ready to open up the 8:30 service for children as well. It's been adult only through this transition period
Right.
of weirdness that was 2020.
Right.
But we're getting ready to add that service for kids as well. So if you want to come and try it out, all you have to do is email me or call me or text me or send a smoke signal. Anything.
You'll find them.
I'll find you.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of volunteers, I really think volunteers need 3 important things. I think they need to know clearly what their job is, and they can rest assured that they will know exactly and specifically what to do. They won't be out there hanging
Right.
to wing it.
Right.
And then they need the resources. So I prepare everything for our volunteers. There's nothing that I want them to do to prepare except to prepare their heart and read the lesson that I send to them ahead of time. And then come a little bit early to go through all the materials so
Right.
that they know what goes with what.
Right.
But in terms of prep, that's pretty much it. And then, I would want you to know too, that lesson plans are a means to an end, but the goal is the connection with kids.
Right.
So if it's all going south, first, you're not alone. There are people to step in and help you, but if it's all going south, then the number one thing is to focus on just think about connecting, relating to, and loving the children in front of you.
Right.
So if somebody wants to email me, simple, I'm Karen@capitalcitychristian.net.
Okay.
And
There's many opportunities within the ministry to do. I mean, small group leaders and people who are helping in the rooms and check-in teams and tech stuff. There's a lot of different places to get plugged in within kids ministry, but email Karen @capitalcitychristian.net.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Karen, thanks for sharing a little bit today about kids ministry. Thanks for joining us